Congrats, you've made it to the end. Today's webinar will be looking at how you can then reliably maintain and hold the gains that you've made as we discuss sustainability. I really hope that I've planted the seed of some sustainable components as you viewed my series of webinars throughout this KEDA online learning environment. So hopefully you've improved. And what's next? So I want you to look at your progress throughout KEDA, the modules you've reviewed, the webinars you've watched, the data cycles you've entered, and the PDSA cycles and test of change that you've done to think and reflect. So to compare that against the collaborative key driver that really guided your improvement work, the interventions and changes that you've done to embrace and adapt them to your unique clinical setting and the providers that you work with and the patients that you've cared for. Thinking on all the changes that you've tested, the various improvements that you've made, to then pull your most recent set of data if that cycle is complete and reflect on that data. We discussed back in our PDSA webinar that there's a gap we wanted to close from ideas and interventions we would like to test to the ultimate endpoint of our goal. And how much of that gap have you been able to close? Did you reach the benchmark that you've set, or do you still have some area that you'd like to work on? And based on that response, you can lend and adapt the next slides and set of information that's coming to meet the needs of where you're currently at. If you've reached the goal, we can move forward with how to sustainably and reliably maintain that and potentially spread. And if you haven't reached your goal, what additional items can you test that will work to further close the gap and to really rely on the theoretical framework that initially guided our improvement efforts, the model for improvement, to again hone your vision, develop some more changes, and to measure their effect that will eventually get you to the goal that you've set out to achieve. So the collaborative is coming to an end. What can you do now? So back a couple webinars, we looked at how we can test things to see what really works within your specific context and environment, the different providers that you may work with, and the patients that you serve. And you've hopefully done a series of tests over a variety of conditions to fine-tune and tweak the evidence base that we've laid out before you to meet the needs of your unique environment, and should now be at the point to implement, where you're ready after a series of tests to integrate these changes into your day-to-day operations. And to take the work that we've done in this green bucket, our improvement period, and those continuous iterative sets of changes, to then move them into the sustainability bucket, where we can work to embed them in our day-to-day practice. Sustainability, there are a series of definitions that can define it. If you look to Webster, it's the endurance of systems and processes. If you look to the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, it's locking in the progress that hospitals have already made and continually building upon it. And my personal favorite is from the Quality Improvement Hub in Scotland, when you take new ways of working and improved outcomes to make them the norm. So in other words, it's when an improvement has become integrated and is the mainstream way of doing things. It should withstand challenges and variation over time through a process of continuous improvement. So it's not set in stone, but it's a continuous work of progress that we build upon to meet the adapting and changing needs of our systems. There are a variety of mechanisms that you can go about sustaining the work that you've done. I think the first one that comes to people's mind is money and acquiring the necessary funding to keep the work going, to fund the people that are doing the work, to buy the items that are necessary. And that is a priority to seek and establish if you haven't done so already. Personnel comes up next, how to allocate their time now that this quote-unquote project is done, to shift this now into the culture of the job. It's not just someone's job for the project, but now it's part of their day-to-day job and maybe something that should be embedded in the job description. Also comes to mind the training of staff in case there's a lot of turnover, or if it's important to retrain them. As we catch and redirect efforts that may have failed, how can we embed retraining and re-education into the personnel time to make sure that everyone is aware of their roles and responsibilities for this project and its maintenance. An important component of personnel is to have team huddles and regular meetings just to keep everyone on the same page. Again, aligning those roles and responsibilities, having a system in place for feedback and evaluation, and keeping everyone bought in and supporting the project as it moves forward. Along that line of buy-in and support, really having your leadership engaged. You want to make sure that they're on board, and they may also be helpful for that money component of acquiring the necessary funds to keep this going. Having systematic structures in place are really important for maintaining the work that you've done. This again could come in the form of how people are trained when they come on board at your practice or your hospital environment, or potentially memory aids. One that comes to mind is embedding stuff within a progress note or in your history and intake, wherever it may be in the course of that flow within, say, electronic medical records, but having those prompts appear so that you can always have this done for every patient that comes through the door. And the final piece is continued evaluation and feedback. Really knowing where everyone stands in your improvement effort as you're improving things is important. But as you're moving away from that regular feedback, having some sort of frequent feedback, however you deem appropriate, the timing period of that, so that people know what's happening, how the improvement effort has been maintained, and if it begins to fall away from that benchmark that you've achieved, how to catch and redirect in a timely manner to display that information publicly and share it, and to get everyone back on task. As we began the collaborative, we discussed the importance of carefully considering and constructing the core quality improvement team to carry on and promote this effort. Leadership was essential to this process, not only in guiding the team effort, but in senior leadership. We then discussed how to engage team members by understanding where individuals were coming from at an emotional, behavioral, and cognitive level to let them know the importance of this effort and the impact it will have with them involved. Team members were encouraged to be empowered, to voice up, feel listened to, and to be involved in the process, that what they said and did was truly valued, heard, and impacted the work throughout this collaborative and improvement effort. Measurement was critical for helping us determine not only the impact of a PDSA cycle or a change effort, but whether it actually resulted in improvement. Real-time data helped drive this learning process. In approaching this collaborative, you learn to be innovative with your thinking and approach to change. The key driver diagram provided a starting point with its interventions, but you adapted ideas to a better way of doing things for your providers, patients, and clinical setting. Your work was evaluated to the degree of improvement, seeking to determine if your objectives and aims were achieved, focusing in on why certain things worked or didn't work, tweaking your approach, and moving forward to realize your short and intermediate outcomes. We discussed the importance of having the system support human factors and to make sure that it would help prevent errors that humans typically do. The final three factors of sustainability will be addressed throughout this presentation as your work to reach your goals, plan for maintaining the level of improvements, or spreading your effort in a reliable manner are discussed. So looking at culture. Culture is our way of understanding the role of behavior and the ability to deliver on improvements. It has three key levels, and it's experienced through artifacts, or the way we see things, values, or the things we say, and beliefs, things that we think and feel are what really drive us. These can all be adjusted in the positive direction. And there are also three additional layers of culture that host levels of attitude and values and are dependent on our involvement. They could be the locale in which our clinical setting is housed, or the national level, the specific place of your work, an organizational level, and your particular professional group to which you belong. All these values and attitudes can shape the culture that you're in. Understanding and acknowledging these levels and layers will have you identify any barriers to continuing or maintaining your improvement effort, as well as characterizing facilitators. The next factor of sustainability is how to put knowledge into action. So a key for success is the accessibility and the use of resources and knowledge. And to improve is to change, but to be perfect, we have to change often. And while this improvement period may be over, the learning process does not have to end and should continue staying at the forefront of your mind. And on the cutting edge, you must continually conduct unofficial tests of change and transform that knowledge so that it's accessible to everyone. This knowledge may be in the form of creating skills, insight, and relationships as a new information is acquired, sharing and disseminating what has been learned, especially during your spread efforts, and finally, integrating that learning into practice for it to be utilized. And you can create this knowledge by combining all your research, the practice that you've done, and the experience of the staff and service users to impact those different levels of knowledge. And to put that knowledge into action using research, experience, and practice. During your sustainability and spread efforts, hone your vision and clearly define what you hope to accomplish in an aim that outlines how people would be going about applying that knowledge at the front line. Take the research that you've done over the past couple weeks or months, gather those who will be involved, and get to the location of the impact to really figure out how to do and impact this sustainability factor of knowledge into action. The final sustainability factor that I'll discuss today is change management. And the key for success here is that people are supported to understand the problem that a change is trying to fix and are involved in the designing and testing of solutions. If you worked as a core quality improvement team and not just by yourself, hopefully this was embedded in your approach to the improvement effort. However, if you're by yourself and now working to spread this, and also for those that worked in a core quality improvement team seeking to spread, really having people involved in a grassroots up type of situation so that they're involved, they understand the problem, and can really help figuring out how to adapt this to the wider broad scale audience. There are two types of things to consider: technical and social changes that might occur. Technical changes are really specific to the nature of the change, and social ones are thinking about how people feel about the changes being made. And while it's important to pay attention to the particulars of the change efforts, you should focus on the people involved in order to really support and drive, as well as sustain the changes being made. Things like the psychology and emotions behind change are crucial to consider as you're managing the change process. As a new change is tested, and as you are working to sustain the change or spread it by getting more people on board, 4 items may be useful in those efforts. So really try and consider the following. Tell a good story. Get people engaged by seeing the purpose of the change and securing their buy-in. Having leadership, or at a minimum, a champion, model the behavior or the change is one way to build self-efficacy through role modeling of the behavior or changes you want to see occur. You have fine-tuned how to do this process as you've worked in your unique clinical setting with your patient population. Now it's time to make sure that the system and processes to accomplish this align with the behaviors that you wish others to do, and making sure that all the mechanisms in place really reinforce and support the behavior of interest. Training, training, and training. Bite-sized pieces or comprehensive, whatever you think is appropriate, to really ensure that your staff has the skill set, competencies, and competence to do what you're suggesting. As you consider this element of sustainability, think about what technical and social elements need to be considered, and if someone is resisting, why that may be, and is there something that you could do differently to address those concerns of the people resisting change as you start to introduce the change to others. To sustain, or not to sustain, but spread. So are you ready? As I mentioned at the beginning of this, have you met and exceeded your goal or benchmark? Have you done it in a reliable and consistent manner? And have all those that have been involved, if this wasn't just you working on it, have they all been using the same processes? If you answered yes to those questions on the previous slide, you should be ready to sustain your work. And here are some next steps. After you've confirmed that you're doing things in a reliable and consistent manner by all parties involved and have met your benchmark, you can begin to identify what you would like to have happen as you work to sustain your work. Thinking about things such as how you'll do continued data collection and review of that data to inform whether or not your efforts are being maintained. While you may have had a core quality improvement team assist in this improvement effort, it's likely that you're going to need help to sustain this effort moving forward. And it may be helpful to identify positions or people that would be accountable for each step and to define the roles that they would plan and play throughout this process. You certainly can use the deployment or swim lane process map you created earlier within KEDA, or make it a little more detailed to better define the roles and responsibilities of all those involved. As you're looking at your sustainability of this work, it's helpful to think about what you should do in case you deviate from the norm, a sort of catch and redirect. So outlining what types of actions should be taken if, when reviewing the data, things aren't going as expected in such reliable and consistent manner at the goal that you've achieved. It's important to determine what ongoing training and competency requirements you think all those should have, and work to embed the 10 sustainability factors if you haven't done so already. At this point, it may be helpful to either form or add to your core quality improvement team. You may have had a small interested group that helped test and build the initial culture for this improvement work, but now it's really time to get people involved so that a tried and tested process can be embedded into the day-to-day work. You need to set an aim. Just like we did at the very beginning part of this process in our testing and project phase, have an aim for what you would like to accomplish through the sustainability of your work, and if it will include how to continually improve the performance during this phase. Finally, measuring progress. Continue to measure your performance in your improvement areas. Measurement and evaluation were instrumental parts of our improvement work, but they're also instrumental and essential to monitoring the sustainability of your work. To regularly review this progress and the work that you've done with your team to ensure that your aims are continually met. This slide comes from the quality improvement webinar you viewed at the beginning of this learning collaborative and touched upon essential elements of the improvement team. You can certainly take these 3 areas and use them as you form a team for sustainability, as well as one for spread. And to consider including someone with system authority, your leader, the clinical and technical expertise, and then someone who will champion from a day-to-day effort and drive the project forward. And now, if you have sustained your work in a reliable and consistent manner within your small clinical setting, it may be time to spread that. And there are 2 definitions that we come across. The Quality Improvement Hub in Scotland defines this as when best practice is disseminated consistently and reliably across a whole system and involves implementation of proven interventions in each applicable care setting. And the Institute for Healthcare Improvement is actively disseminating best practice and knowledge about every intervention and implementing each intervention in every available care setting. Very similar to what we discussed with our improvement and our sustainability efforts, lay the appropriate foundation, have a clear message, team, and leader who will share the successful results of your work in this collaborative and this improvement effort. Develop a plan and start with your aim by thinking smart. In your aim, what do you intend to spread? What's the best practice, and how do you achieve the best practice? Are you spreading both those messages or just one or the other? What is the goal of this effort? What plans are in place to measure your spread effort? How will this occur and with what frequency? Who will be your target audience for this new change package that you've tested and spread it to? When do you want all this spread to occur by? Use your organizational structure to disseminate the information. You could host seminars, sessions that are both didactic and interactive. Give reasons and selling points. It's really also important to be there as a support. Address questions that people may have and help them align their efforts, be it in measurement or feedback, to get them on the right foot and move forward. Be readily available. Engage your staff and find out why others are doing it and build upon it. And as we learned in our improvement period, test, and refine. The testing's not over, so learn what works best as you seek to spread this and build upon it. So our final action item for this collaborative is to determine your next steps. Are you ready to continue your improvement efforts, to establish and fine-tune sustainable systems, processes, and supports, or to spread your work? Determine which of those you need to do, and then create and foster an engaged and empowered team to do one of those 3 items. Start by hosting a team meeting. Communicate your purposes and what you want to accomplish. Start the meeting too by highlighting all the team members' skills, and keep these in mind for the upcoming activities that are dependent on the choice you selected above. Discuss the time commitments, the level of involvement, and the potential effect on current workloads, so everyone walks away with knowing what they have to do and what it means on their current job and workload. And outline your plan. Just like we did for our PDSA cycles, note your plan and have that ready to go. Good luck.